So, welcome. We are entering now in these two sessions that we are combining into one, that basically we want to see future topics that could be interesting, but maybe they don't need to be part of the core curriculum right now of when we discuss aspects about entrepreneurial finance. Those two topics are: how does legitimacy building strategies, ways to engage with the stakeholders and others, shape a bit what we can do when it comes to financing a new venture. This is interesting because legitimacy building strategies have been proven to be very useful in these early stages when a new venture is being created. The other topic that we also put in this box of future topics is options, or more specifically, real options. Options theory has been used for quite a while already, again in finance, in other also application areas. For us, it's interesting to understand the basics and how those basics, like what is an option, what is a pull option or a call option, a put option and a call option, and how can we use them when it comes to projects. That's what we aim to do in this session. So first of all, on legitimacy and financing. What we want to share here is that building legitimacy is a good idea, and doing this being aware of what it means for your company and for maybe the people you are engaging with or the stakeholders can be a very good idea. Also, what we will do is that we will look, for example, at two cases that could maybe help to get an idea on how to use these different legitimizing or legitimacy strategies. So quite often question is like, okay, I'm starting a new project, technologically I might be weaker than other maybe established players, but how can I make it so that people start to consider me as a potential option, as a valid alternative? So the whole discussion that we have is that why sometimes you have an innovative technology, but that actually doesn't get funded. And also at the same time, why some cases that they don't have maybe the best technology in the market actually manages to get funded and actually becomes then successful. If you want, you can stop here, maybe just mentally for a moment think about a couple of examples that come to your mind on some products where the best technology doesn't get the traction in the market or the funding, and where other situations where the most promising technology doesn't get the attention that maybe it should deserve. What we would like to say is that actually this happens quite often. And what we, for example, were looking at some point was the situation when an interesting technology or interesting projects in the clean tech area were not getting funded. And one of the reasons was because there was too much uncertainty. And sometimes the way that the company or the startup would communicate their strengths or their technology was not clear enough to the potential investors or people that could give them a grant or other situations. What we did in this interesting research is that we looked at something called signaling perspective. That is basically how do you use objective information that you have that can be shared, that it's visible, to give information about unobservable aspects of your company. For instance, if you want to show that your R&D development is state-of-the-art and is rock solid, you might want to explain that you've been able to register a patent. So a patent is an objective element that can be used to actually communicate something about the capacity or skills that you have in your R&D, and that this will help maybe in the future to grow up the business, to do the best products, or at least better than the competition. The whole story that we have about building legitimacy is that what the stakeholders or investors would like to get, the information or certainty that they would like to have about our company, is not possible. Therefore, they use clues, they use shortcuts that help them to, like in an heuristics approach, like get a sense of what is going on. But this is not a very precise and objective process. So we need to be aware of this process so we can influence on the process and in some way take advantage of it. So this is the example just because it's a bit of a self-promotion, but that's some work that we've been doing with colleagues in Norway, where they were having a few cases on startups that actually were developing very promising technology. What we found out is that their legitimacy building, let's say, strategies, this use of signaling, it was not only used to reveal things that were not being observed or that was not clear enough, for example, the quality of their technology or their ability maybe to grow or to deliver actually the products in time, but actually it was also used to conceal some weaknesses that the team was aware of. So for example, they would engage in some objective activities like maybe hiring an experienced member for their board in order to compensate for a concern that they had, that was that maybe they lacked experience or they lack industry context. So that if a person looking at the new venture would realize that by seeing that they had also an experienced member, that would be compensating. So that's why we call it this title of reveal or conceal as a part of our discussion. So a bit more specific, what do we know about this whole story about how to build legitimacy? If you look at this from the signaling theory, so basically you know that you issue a signal, there is a person that receives this signal, and then based on how it is processed, how it is observed, that person will take an action that will give you feedback on how the signal was being processed by the receiver. So then, as you can also very quickly imagine, what we would like to know is what type of signals should I send so that I can build the legitimacy that maybe helps me to overcome some challenges that I am facing at that moment. One of the challenge, a classic one, is I have difficulties getting access to resources. For example, funding or talent or other potential resources that I need for my startup. And I also maybe I might be having difficulties to convince some industrial clients or in the market. So then our signals will be these costly actions. So those actions don't go for free. Signaling has to require at least an effort, but actually that they will convey information about those unobservable qualities or, let's say, virtues of my company. There has been a long story already on research that we were trying to understand what is the effect of building legitimacy and how new ventures can build legitimacy. So for quite a while, the idea was that basically there was a challenge, that is this liability of newness, that you are a new company, you don't have reputation, and you need to build legitimacy. And we were looking at this and describing this as a very continuous process, from not having enough to maybe reaching a threshold, and that then this would allow you to grow and develop and build more reputation. However, what we have, as this topic has kept advancing, what we have learned is that actually looking at this as a continuous process was an oversimplification of reality. What we instead now would suggest, and that's the advice that we would give to you, is that you should look at this legitimacy building through different stages in the evolution of the new venture. Again, simplifying or oversimplifying reality, the challenges that you have related to the technological concept or the initial commercialization, this first client, are different from the challenges you have when you want to grow, to scale up. This would mean then that the things that might help you to build that legitimacy at the very beginning are not the same things that will help you later on. So maybe some part of the reputation you built or legitimacy helps you in the next stage, but some things might not help you. This means that you need a more tailored, a more specific approach for the different companies or the different possible ventures. Again then, in a more granular, a more precise way, we could think about this. This is a very nice work by Greg Fisher and other authors that basically they were trying to even break it down into up to 3 thresholds, for example. You could even imagine more if you wanted to make it more detailed, more complex. But basically what they were already suggesting, especially in the case of an R&D or science-based startup, would be that first, in this conceptual moment, you need these grant suppliers. This is maybe the public system or National Science Foundation or other types of foundations or government programs that help to develop new cutting-edge technologies. But in the next stages, you will need to build up the capacities and skills to attack or approach those new stakeholders that can provide what you need for each stage. And the message is different. The signals are different then. I don't want to go into too much detail, but again, this is the paper that you can also look. It's again an advanced or refined version of the paper. This one is from 2017, also from Greg Fisher and co-authors. And basically what they summarize here, and I would suggest that you stop the video and you look at it and spend a bit of time, is that you see different types of audiences, stakeholders, different suggestions on how to approach them, how does legitimacy work, and what you should take into account for each of them. So take a moment, stop the video, and try to look at it or read through it more carefully. Let's continue. Now we look again, the same structure, but now what we want to see is this combination also when we look at what type of mechanism, why does legitimacy work for each of them? What is the trick? What is the, let's say, story that we should come to each of them? Now, in the previous slide, we know that they are different, but then now the suggestion here is what can you use to build legitimacy for each of those stakeholders or audiences that you might have. Again, I would suggest here you stop the video and then you look at it more carefully. Read through it, please. As we continue, what we want to look next is that two possible cases where you could be using these lenses, this way of working. Both of them are what we could call emerging technologies. One of them is more a process, is a way of working, and the other one is a very specific machine that you could imagine that you've been able to develop in your lab. The first one is the concept of the roll-to-roll production systems, and the other one is a concept called Orion microscope from a private company, but you could just imagine that you are a research team that has managed to put together all the pieces to create this microscope, and then you would have the challenges, okay, what do I do next? If I want to talk about this project to a VC, or to a seed investor, or to maybe a crowdfunding platform, what approach should I be following for each of them? The next thing that we would do then is that you could give a try on these 2 different or 3 different approaches for each of those technologies. So at least I just want to show you what is this about. You can actually look for it or Google for it. The case of the R2R, or the case of, for example, this Orion Helium microscope that, as I told you, this is developed by a private company, but you could think that this is a product of a research project that now you want to commercialize and bring out. So pick one of the 2 and then try to go and give yourself kind of the opportunity to test the 2 frameworks that we have seen, in particular this last one. So how would you approach for the Orion microscope or for the R2R production system a grant administrator? How would you try to convince them that your project makes sense? And then you can do the same for maybe a venture capitalist. The objective is that you look inside the box, these different mechanisms, and that you try to find how your message, your signal, should be different, and how different should it be in order to compel, to attract that possible stakeholder. The suggestion is that after looking at this, you stop the video, take time, try to do this exercise. This could be a 15, 20, 30 minutes exercise. Even if you want to go and find those original articles talking about the topic to become more familiar, then it will require even some extra time for this. Once you have done this, this first part is over. Then it will be time to look at the second block of the session. In this second block, we want to look at options. Options is a sexy concept, but what we want to cover in this specific session is the nature of options. Why are options interesting? Not to become experts in options. Why do we talk about real options in an entrepreneurial finance or finance for engineers course? We talk about them because something that you already have been feeling during part of the course is that our models sometimes don't capture well risk. They are oversimplifying reality, they are just snapshots, and we would need more sophisticated tools. Also, in real life, a lot of the projects offer you flexibility, so they offer you options to do other things in the future. And this is not captured with a simple one-way modeling or forecasting where everything ends up being just using the percentage adjustments. So we would like to have options to capture things like, okay, maybe I want to have in 1 year the possibility to expand that business if the market works. Conditional to X, I would like to do Y or Z. Similarly, I also would like to sometimes have the option to maybe suspend or abandon a business. And I would like to know how much would it cost to me to just pull out from that project. What we then would be claiming is that managerial flexibility as a valuable aspect of projects is not easy to capture in a discounted cash flow in a DCF, like the ones we've been using and the templates that we have been adopting during these last months. So, real options valuation becomes an option that is interesting for us. You could now, or we could spend time trying to understand the evolution, the history behind real options. So there is even a Nobel Prize material when Myers, also in 1977, was able to start to develop these concepts, basically claiming that firms have two types of assets. Some of them are real assets. They have market value regardless of the firm investment strategy. This could, you can imagine, a factory or an equipment that you have that is working in a company. But then what also firms have is options, so opportunities to purchase some of those assets on favorable terms depending on some aspects in the future. So you have this right to, this option to, and that's why we call it these opportunities, options, that they are always present in a business, that you could invest more, you could divest. So how do we capture those things? Why do we have this interest in this topic? Is because this is particularly interesting in situations where there is uncertainty. For example, an innovative technology behaves like this type of intangible assets. Financially, it's very invisible. How innovative is this new product that we are developing in the lab, that we are just testing the first prototype? How do we value this? It's very hard. But could we then try to measure the value of this technology by trying to link it to other assets, to the future developments of the company? If this technology gets adopted, then we can become, let's say, the leaders in this market category or the owners of this new platform that will be created. So this is particularly useful when it comes to R&D and R&D projects management. Just to insist, the use of the discounted cash flow is unfit in these situations. It's not that it's a bad option, it's just that it doesn't fit that well. For example, when we want to know what happens if I can do a follow-up from a capital investment, depending on if the technology has reached a certain maturity stage. Okay, I cannot capture this. Now, what we end up doing a lot of times in the discounted cash flow is this terminal value that it looks like a black box, that it's based on future growth, and it's quite arbitrary. And I think that we all would agree that that's one of the downsides of this modeling approach. So the question now would be, what type of options do I have? What we would like to classify is that we have growth options. So options that gives you the possibility to increase the investment, upgrade the technology, or enter other industrial applications. They are called usually switch-up options or scope-up options. You also have abandonment options. This is the idea that you can also shrink or divest some of the positions you have. Close down a project, scale it down, option to maybe switch to a more cost-effective method, or limit the scope of this project. Finally, You also have deferral options. Maybe the idea to postpone. So allows the allows the management to delay that investment in a capital project, giving you that extra time. So maybe for some time you just invest in the project, you learn something about it, and then you take some time to decide whether you want to continue or not continue. And that's an interesting thing, because maybe this gives you the right time to put something on hold till it's the moment to launch it in the market without losing the project. In a super simplification of what happens in these option walls, basically let's try to summarize this in two types of options. This is like the call options and the put options. So the call options would be trying to reflect these growth opportunities, and the put options would try to reflect these abandonment opportunities. That in the case that I want to sell or things don't go the right way, I can benefit some way of the situation. How those get priced and how those should be valued, there is a nice complex, now it's also from Black Skulls. If you want to look for it, you are more than free to do that. You could stop the video and look for the formula. But what I would like is that you at least get an intuition in a very graphical way. So, again, just to take a step back, why do we need options? To be able to model risk. Can they be useful? Yes. So we think that options, even if they have some bad reputation when it comes to derivatives, they are useful, and they could be a useful tool if they are properly used. Do they add any value? Yes, we would like to argue that using options you can capture additional sources of value that with the other models you can only estimate or try to control or put as part of your overall model, but in a very gross or not precise way. Is it the same to talk about futures, derivatives, and options? The answer is no. Those are different types of products, and the sophistication of those products has been increasing even during the financial crisis, or before the financial crisis, now, and probably in the future. What we are trying to do is to just understand the underlying concepts or principles. In this sense, what we would like to explain or see. What is a call option? So if I buy a call option, what I'm getting is the right to secure a profit if in the future things go well. What I do basically is I pay a premium, that's the concept that you see here also described, and when then there is a bigger payoff in the future than maybe expected right now, when we call it the concept of a strike price, when things start to go in the direction that I wanted, then I will get the current price minus that premium that I am paying as my profit that I would be able to take away. For every option, what is important is to understand that there is always a selling side for that option. There is someone that carries the risk. So you might be wondering, but there is some people that might think that maybe that project doesn't have any future at all. And they are happy to give you the option to profit if the project goes ahead. And what they ask you then is a premium. And then they will keep the premium in any case. So if after 3 months the project has not gotten better, the things are not going in that direction, you lose that right, because the right is allocated with a limited time. And then if after 3 months things have not turned the way that you wanted, you will not use that call option, you will just give away the premium. From the person selling it, this could be a good business. The same thing then happens the other way around. So we can also have an option to sell at the actual price. So we are assuming that maybe that project will be worthless. So this could be, you could see that as a kind of an insurance product. So I want to make sure that I have this project running. I believe it's interesting, but I want to make sure that if for me this becomes worthless, I still can recover some of the money. I get a potential benefit. Again, the benefit I will get will be the actual payoff minus the premium that I have paid for this insurance product. On the other hand, what happens from the person selling that put option is that if the things go bad, they will have to compensate me for the actual price or final price that they actually liquidate. So they will have a potential strong downside if things don't go well. But what they are assuming in this case is that things will not, there is no problem, nothing will be happening. Probably you're already getting the feeling that this looks quite a lot like a normal insurance product, where if things go very badly, you will get compensation. If things go as normal, you will just don't use it, you will just have paid the premium, you would have lost a little bit, but you also will not be using this option. This is a very summarized way of bringing those options into play. So you can imagine that having an option, so a project that includes this option becomes a more valuable project for you because it protects you from maybe a downside, or maybe a project can be defined just to give you that upside. So you pay that little bit to be part of a company or part of a startup, and in case the startup goes well, then you can invest more. So this upside is something valuable for you. The same happens with the technology. So maybe the startup is developing a product for a market that if things go well, that can be worth a lot. But if things go bad, the only thing they do is that they lose the money that they have been investing, this premium that they have been putting in. But that's a controlled approach to maybe have access to a potentially very big market. So with these very brief summaries, what we want is that just to get a feeling for how those things work. Now it's time also that you can look at your specific valuation case. Feel free to add some reflections or comments in relation to legitimacy or options if you feel like doing so, but it's not mandatory. Only some brief wrap-up comments on which things now you should be feeling comfortable, or when it comes to discuss or argue in the valuation report. Now you should be able to start talking about the different financial ratios. You need to be able to argue for your projections. Why do they make sense? Why they don't make sense? On number of units that they will be selling, or maybe on the number of people that they will be hiring. You also should be able to discuss or to comment on why do you think that the capex or the capital expenditures will increase in the future or will decrease, and how this will affect on the costs and your forecast on when it comes to the discounted cash flow of the company. And also other aspects related to the culture or the values of the company, maybe that we want to sell premium products with a nice margin. You also should be able to then capture those things in your valuation. Again, the objective is that we are able to understand the business going beyond the photo of what is right now, what are the net profits right now, and trying to look even more on how do things look like in the next 3-4 years, their evolution in the coming years, and how this actually impacts or makes their valuation richer or actually depreciates the valuation when we look at the business as it is right now. That's it for this session.